So, Dana-Louise, you've been Vice President for European Government Affairs at Microsoft, company that you joined 20 years ago. So you know it like the back of your hand.
I know.
And the company that...
Yes, it's been too long, maybe.
That doesn't really need presentation, right? We know that, like other large tech companies, Microsoft also features prominently on the current European debate about the so-called technological sovereignty. But what does sovereignty means in your eyes in this particular debate? And do you think there are misconceptions or misunderstandings that are common?
No, I think that is a question many of us are asking ourselves, what is sovereignty? I think it's only natural for companies and governments to think, to wanting to be sovereign, to be resilient, and to have control over your own destiny. I'm European too, and I want Europe to succeed. I want Europe to be resilient, to be competitive. When you talk about digital resiliency, it's about control. Having control over your data, making sure that the provider that you work with respect privacy, making sure that you are secure. And for that, it's not enough to be European. And I think that goes to your question about the misconceptions, because there is a misconception that being European, being a European tech provider, can ensure your sovereignty or your resiliency. But actually, it's not a guarantee that a European company will be secure. For example, one of the biggest cybersecurity attacks in history, not Patea attack in Ukraine some years ago, that came through a vulnerability in a European provider. So what you want to think about is, who is the provider who can ensure you cybersecurity, who can ensure that your data is handled in the way that you want, that you have control of your data, where your data is going. A company that can ensure that your privacy is respected. So I think these more objective criteria are more important than whether you are European or not European. There was a very interesting example recently where a Canadian court ordered a French cloud provider to give them access to information that was stored on servers in France. Mm-hmm. So it's not only US companies who are subject to these kind of requests from foreign governments.
So you spoke about digital resilience. So what do you think should be the concrete steps that Europe should take in order to build a real digital resilience?
No, I think the first relates to what I just said. Make sure that that we select technology companies who give this assurance around respect for European values and laws, cybersecurity, and so on, like I just mentioned. Then I think there's a lesson learned from Ukraine in investing in threat intelligence and cybersecurity. In Ukraine, there's really two wars going on, a conventional war and a cyber war. And the cyber war is very important because there's a lot of attacks on infrastructure, on communication systems. And I heard a Ukraine minister say the other day that, had it not been for collaboration with US tech on threat intelligence information, they would have lost that law by now because they wouldn't have been able to address and prevent those cyber attacks that happened. So I think that will be important for Europe to think about that aspect as well on resiliency, cybersecurity, and threat intelligence. Maybe the third thing is a legislative framework that is simple, clear. What we hear from our customers is that they pause a little bit with adopting new technology because they want to make sure that they do it in a compliant way. So let's make sure we have legislation that is easy to understand, simple to implement, not as overlapping. And then for companies that work on a global basis, that there is interoperability, in lack of a better word, but some consistency with rules across the borders as well.
Interesting. So let's go back to this concept of sovereignty. We know that when we speak of sovereignty, the debate tends sometimes to drift a bit toward populist rhetoric.
Yeah.
So how could we improve the dialogue between policymakers and industry actors in order to ensure a more pragmatic and fact-based discussion about Europe's digital future?
Yeah, I like the fact-based.
Fact-based,
I think
exactly.
that's a good one. We are only a company. It's governments who makes the rules. But I'm happy to give my 3 cents. I think it has to start with what we want to achieve. We want to achieve resiliency, and we want to be competitive, and we want to have innovation. So what's the legislation that we need in order to get that? And what do we already have to achieve this? So one example, and maybe back to your first question about misconceptions. There's all this discussion about gigafactories, and we need gigafactories so that companies have a place to deploy and develop new AI models. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, we have all that infrastructure that is needed because a lot of American companies invested in Europe and built those data centers. And at least for Microsoft, we have opened up all our data centers to everyone, every company, open source competitors who want to train their models, deploy their models in our data centers on fair terms, on better terms that we give our competitors in the US, for example. So it is very, very difficult and very, very expensive to use our money on building that infrastructure. I think the opportunity for Europe is to build on that infrastructure and make the next innovation of products. Like when we got electricity and we had all the amazing infrastructure in terms of power plants, that's not the interesting business opportunity. The interesting opportunity is to build those new electrical devices, or it's the same thing with AI. There's the foundational infrastructure that you can use to develop new products, to develop new solutions. So I think that's where Europe should focus, because Europe is actually extremely strong in many domains. It's world leading, actually, on chemicals, on green tech, on pharmaceuticals. And we focus a lot on what we don't have, but here we are very strong, so to build on that strength and make sure we infuse those sectors with the newest technology and can be world leading, that's what makes us competitive. And that's a good place to place our bet, I think.
Of course, speaking about the global scene now, we're moving a bit outside Europe. We are trying in Europe to strengthen our digital capabilities while at the same time, as you said, preserving control and autonomy. In a world scene where we have a wide array of possible partners.
Yeah.
What do you think should guide Europe's choice of a partner in this domain?
I think we need to find partners who share our values. Fundamental values around rule of law, respect of privacy, values that are essential in Europe. So I think that's important. Choose the technology partners who commit to Europe, who commit to investing in Europe, investing in Europe's skilling, investing in innovation, commit to comply with European laws. I think that's important. But not only is here to do their own thing, but collaborate with European companies, empower European companies, invest in skilling again. That's something that we are doubling down a lot on, is to invest in skilling. And with every data center investment we make a strong commitment to skilling the population as well.
Thank you. You spoke before about competitiveness. That is one of the main goals, and we know that AI plays a crucial role in ensuring global competitiveness, and will play an even more crucial role in the future. So my question would be, what priorities should Europe set in order to harness the full potential of AI, as I said before, in a more and more competitive world?
Yeah, I think I alluded a little bit to it, but those of you who heard me speak about this before, I apologize, or seen it on Instagram, on LinkedIn. But there is Draghi has said the same thing, but there's a US professor who wrote the most important book in our field last year. And he looked really into, what makes a country successful when there's a technology revolution. And he looks at it in a very methodical way, and he finds out that it's not so much who invented the technology. It's also not so much the country that, the country that were building the infrastructure, the company that built the infrastructure. The countries that really made a big GDP growth during a technology revolution were the countries who were able to fast adopt the new technology. So take electricity again. It was not so much who invented electricity. It's not so much who built the power plants, but those countries that understood that this technology could be used to invent new solutions and create new products, the blender, the vacuum cleaner, the whatever. Those were the countries that really had a GDP explosion. And I think it's the same thing with AI. The countries, not so much who invented it or who built the data center infrastructure, the countries that will fastest adopt and diffuse the technology into all. I talked about the strong European domains before. That's important. And we see it already in some of the strong, big European companies, like from my home country, Denmark, Novo Nordisk or Vestas, really infusing the technology and getting faster new drug discovery process, cutting 2 years of that process, or getting 20% more energy out of the windmills. So I think diffusion is important. Diffusion and adoption, that's one. And the other one is skilling. Make sure, and this is also something that Jeffrey Ding is mentioning in his survey and his book, the country that managed to skill up the population so that they're able to use the new technology. So that we should not forget. Investing in the people, that's very important.
Well, I think skilling up is maybe one of our best qualities in Europe, education in general, but probably not fast adopting. It's not what we're most known for, no? What do you think we could improve something?
I think you are absolutely right. The people, that's Europe's strength. And there's a lot of focus on this in the Commission and in the member states that skilling is important. The adoption, yes, that's, I think von der Leyen said herself, I think we're at 14%, and the US is above 50%, and China even higher. So there's work to do. We have to, and let's finish on a positive note, because I often get the question, has the train left the station? Is it too late for Europe? No, it's not. It's just begun. Europe has so much potential. We have so much strength that we can build on. And let's take the next big thing, quantum, or the next after that.
Great. I love this positive attitude. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
For this great. Thank you.